The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers when Kina walked into my shop that Tuesday night, her heels clicking against the concrete floor like a countdown timer. I was elbow deep in the engine bay of a 1967 Mustang, trying to coax life back into its carburetor, when she appeared beside my workbench with that practiced smile she wore for difficult clients. "Rhett, I need to ask you something," she said, setting her designer purse down next to my tool collection. The contrast was stark, her pristine leather against my oil-stained workspace. "It's about Jasper." I wiped my hands on a shop rag, already knowing this conversation would change everything. Kina never visited the shop unless she needed something. In 3 years of marriage, she'd made exactly 4 appearances here, each time with an agenda. "What about him?" I asked, though I already suspected where this was heading. Jasper Quaid, her college boyfriend, the tech entrepreneur who'd made millions selling some app I'd never bothered to understand. She'd mentioned him increasingly often over the past month, always in that casual way that meant nothing was casual about it. "He's coming to town next weekend for a conference," she said, her voice steady and measured. "I need you to pretend we broke up. My ex is coming to town and I want to see if there's still something between us." The words hung in the air like exhaust fumes. I studied her face, looking for some sign this was a joke, but Kina's expression remained perfectly composed. She'd practiced this speech. "You want me to pretend we're divorced so you can test drive your ex-boyfriend?" I said, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. "Not divorced, just separated, temporarily." She reached into her purse and pulled out her spare phone, sliding it across my workbench. "I'm giving you this so I won't be tempted to text you during the weekend. Clean break, you know?" I stared at the phone, a sleek silver device that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The same phone she used for work calls when her primary device was charging. The same phone that contained her calendar, her contacts, her entire digital life. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. "It's not planned, Rhett. It's just an opportunity to figure some things out." She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture she'd never quite eliminated despite years of media training. "We've been drifting apart anyway. You know that." She wasn't wrong. Our marriage had become a series of polite exchanges about bills and schedules. She worked late at her PR firm downtown, climbing the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency. I spent my evenings in the shop, restoring classic cars for clients who appreciated craftsmanship over quarterly profits. We occupied the same apartment, but lived in different worlds. "So what happens after your weekend experiment?" I asked. "We'll talk. Figure out what we both want." She glanced around the shop, taking in the vintage posters and tool cabinets. Maybe this is the push we need to make some real decisions. I picked up her phone, feeling its weight in my palm. Such a small thing to represent the end of everything we'd built together. But maybe she was right. Maybe we'd been pretending for longer than either of us wanted to admit. "Okay," I said. The simplicity of my response seemed to catch her off guard. She'd probably prepared for arguments, negotiations, tears. Instead, I set the phone in my pocket and turned back to the Mustang. "That's it?" she asked. "You want a breakup? You've got one." I selected a socket wrench from my toolbox, my movements deliberate and calm. "I'll clear out this weekend, give you all the space you need." "Rhett, you don't have to." "Yeah, I do." I looked at her directly, and for the first time in months, I felt completely clear about something. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. No half measures. She nodded slowly, perhaps realizing she'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for, even if it wasn't what she'd expected. "I'll see you Monday then. We can talk about everything." "Sure," I said, though I was already thinking about other things, like the lease agreement sitting in our apartment filing cabinet, the one she'd never bothered to read carefully, the one with my name listed as primary tenant. After she left, I finished adjusting the carburetor and locked up the shop. The drive home took me through the heart of our city, past the glass towers where Keena worked, and the industrial district where I'd built my business. Rain streaked the windshield, turning the streetlights into abstract smears of yellow and red. Our apartment building was one of those converted warehouses that developers loved. Exposed brick, high ceilings, and rent that increased 15% every year. I parked in my designated spot and took the elevator to the 4th floor, listening to the mechanical hum that had become the soundtrack to our domestic life. Inside the apartment, Keena was already in the bedroom, packing a small overnight bag. She'd changed into casual clothes, jeans, and a sweater that made her look younger, more like the woman I'd married. "I'm staying at Talia's tonight," she said without looking up. "Give us both time to process this." Talia Morrison, her best friend and fellow PR executive. They'd worked together for 5 years, scheming their way up the corporate hierarchy with the precision of military strategists. If anyone would support Keena's weekend experiment, it would be Talia. "Makes sense," I said, heading for the filing cabinet in our home office. I found the lease agreement exactly where I'd left it 18 months ago, when we'd renewed for another 2 years. Keena had been traveling for work that week, so I'd handled all the paperwork myself. The document was clear: Rhett Vossen, primary tenant; Keena Vossen, authorized occupant. Small details matter in situations like this. I'd learned that during my 4 years in the Army, before I'd discovered my talent for rebuilding engines. Logistics win wars, my sergeant used to say. The side with better paperwork usually comes out ahead. I photographed every page of the lease, then uploaded the images to a secure cloud account I'd created years ago for important documents. Next, I gathered my bank statements, insurance papers, and utility bills. Everything that proved this apartment was mine, legally and financially. Keena emerged from the bedroom with her bag, car keys jingling in her hand. "I'll call you Sunday night, okay? After Jasper leaves town." "Take your time," I said. "Really think things through." She paused at the door, perhaps sensing something different in my tone. "Rhett, this doesn't have to be the end of everything. It's just a break, a chance to figure out what we really want." "I know exactly what I want," I told her. "The question is whether you do." After she left, I opened a bottle of beer and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. The apartment felt different already, quieter but somehow more alive. I'd been holding my breath for months without realizing it. My phone buzzed with a text from Samir, my friend who owned a dive bar called The Anchor about 10 minutes from the shop. "Heard through the grapevine your lady's making moves. You okay?" I typed back, "Better than okay. Free weekend ahead. Come by tomorrow night. First round's on me." Samir had been through his own divorce 3 years earlier, a messy affair involving a cheating wife and a custody battle that had nearly bankrupted him. He'd emerged from the experience with a philosophy he called strategic indifference, the art of caring just enough to protect yourself without wasting energy on things you couldn't control. I spent the next hour organizing my finances, something I should have done months ago. Our joint checking account held about $3,000, money we'd been saving for a vacation we'd never quite managed to plan. I transferred my half to my personal account, leaving a paper trail that showed I'd taken only what belonged to me. Then I called the utility companies: electric, gas, internet, cable, every service connected to the apartment. I explained the situation calmly and professionally. Marital separation, need to ensure continuous service, updating the primary account holder information. By midnight, every bill was in my name alone. The lease addendum was trickier, but not impossible. Our building manager, Mr. Feld, was a practical man who'd seen plenty of tenant drama over the years. I drafted an email explaining that Keena would be moving out temporarily, possibly permanently, and that I wanted to formalize my status as sole occupant. I attached the relevant documentation and scheduled a meeting for Friday afternoon. My phone rang at 12:30. Keena's number appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Whatever second thoughts she was having could wait until morning. The message was brief. Rhett, I just wanted to make sure you're okay with everything. Call me back when you get this. I deleted the message without listening to it twice. She'd asked for space to figure things out, and I was giving her exactly that. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do for someone is take them at their word. I spent Friday morning at the shop, working on a 1972 Chevelle that needed a complete engine rebuild. The methodical process of disassembly and inspection helped clear my mind. Every component had a purpose. Every connection mattered. When something was broken, you either fixed it or replaced it. You didn't pretend it was working. Mr. Feld met me in the building lobby at 3 o'clock, a stack of papers tucked under his arm. He was a thin man in his 60s, with the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades managing other people's living situations. "Marital troubles?" he asked as we rode the elevator to his office. "Temporary separation," I said. "Possibly permanent. Happens more often than you'd think, especially with the younger tenants." He unlocked his office door and gestured for me to sit. "Good thing the lease is in your name. Makes this much simpler." We spent 20 minutes reviewing the paperwork. The building's policy was straightforward. Primary tenants could remove authorized occupants with 30 days written notice. Since Keena had never been added as a co-tenant, her legal status was essentially that of a guest with permission to stay. "I'm not trying to kick her out immediately," I explained, "but I want to protect myself legally if things go sideways." "Smart thinking," Mr. Feld said, stamping the addendum with official approval. "This gives you options. If she wants to reconcile, you can always rescind the notice. If not, you're covered." I left his office with a sense of completion I hadn't felt in months. Every detail had been handled properly, every contingency planned for. Whatever happened next weekend, I'd be ready. That evening at the Anchor, Samir poured me a whiskey and listened while I explained the situation. The bar was quiet for a Friday night, just a few regulars watching baseball on the mounted television. "So she asked you to fake a breakup so she could test drive her ex," Samir summarized, "and you turned it into a real breakup." "I turned it into what she actually wanted," I corrected. "She just didn't have the courage to ask for it directly." "You think she's planning to leave you anyway?" "I think she's been planning it for months. This weekend is just her way of making it official." I took a sip of whiskey, feeling the burn settle in my chest. "The question is whether she'll have the guts to admit it." Samir nodded thoughtfully. He'd been in the boxing ring during his younger years, and he still approached problems like a fighter. Watch your opponent, wait for an opening, strike when the moment was right. "What's your next move?" he asked. "Wait and see what she does, then respond accordingly." "That's it? No grand gesture? No fight for your marriage?" "You can't fight for something that's already over," I said, "but you can control how it ends." Saturday passed quietly. I worked in the shop, reorganized my tools, and started planning some improvements to the workspace. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward instead of just treading water. Sunday evening, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was a hotel downtown, confirming a reservation charged to the credit card I kept for emergencies, the one that was supposed to be for emergencies only, the one Keena had access to for exactly that purpose. The reservation was for 2 guests. The name on the booking was Jasper Quaid. I stared at the screen, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my stomach. She'd used my credit card to pay for her romantic weekend with her ex-boyfriend. Either she'd forgotten about the automatic email confirmations, or she'd assumed I wouldn't check my email until Monday. Both possibilities suggested she thought I was stupid. I forwarded the email to Mr. Feld with a brief explanation. Unauthorized use of my credit card by soon-to-be former spouse. Then, I sent a copy to our building's insurance company, which had specific policies about tenants allowing unauthorized guests to use primary tenant resources. The response from Mr. Feld came within an hour. "Documentation received and filed. This supports your addendum request. Let me know if you need anything else." I spent the rest of Sunday evening preparing for Monday. I transferred the remaining money from our joint account to my personal account, leaving exactly $1 to keep it technically open. I changed the passwords on all our shared online accounts, streaming services, cloud storage, the works. I scheduled the cable and internet to be disconnected on Tuesday, with new service under my name alone starting Wednesday. By the time Keena called Sunday night, I was ready. Rhett? It's me. Jasper just left for the airport and I think we should talk. Her voice sounded different, more confident. The weekend had apparently gone well. How was your experiment? I asked. It was clarifying. I think I know what I want now. She paused, probably expecting me to ask what that was. When I didn't, she continued. I'd like to come home tomorrow so we can discuss everything properly. That's not going to work, I said. What do you mean? I mean you don't live here anymore. I filed the paperwork Friday. You have 30 days to collect your belongings. The silence stretched for almost 10 seconds. I could hear traffic in the background, the ambient noise of the city at night. Rhett, what are you talking about? It was just a weekend, a break. We agreed. We agreed to pretend we broke up, I interrupted. I decided to stop pretending. You can't just kick me out of my own apartment. It's not your apartment. It never was. Check the lease if you don't believe me. Another long pause. I imagined her scrolling through her phone, trying to find a copy of the lease agreement she'd never bothered to read. This is insane, she said finally. You're being completely unreasonable. I'm being practical. You wanted to see if there was still something between you and Jasper. Congratulations. You found your answer. Now live with it. Rhett, please, can we just talk about this like adults? We're not pretending anymore, I said, and hung up. The phone started ringing again immediately, but I powered it off and tossed it onto the kitchen counter. Whatever Keena wanted to say could wait until morning. I had work to do. I spent Monday morning at the shop, working on the Chevelle's transmission while my mind processed the new reality. Keena had made her choice, and now I was making mine. The difference was that I'd been planning for this moment since Friday night, while she'd apparently expected everything to return to normal after her weekend adventure. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Talia. Keena's staying with me until you calm down and start acting rationally. Call her. I deleted the message without responding. Talia Morrison had always struck me as the kind of person who created drama for entertainment value. She and Keena fed off each other's ambitions and grievances, spending their evenings crafting elaborate revenge fantasies against co-workers who'd slighted them. Now I was apparently their latest project. My actual phone rang at 2 o'clock. Samir's name appeared on the screen. You hear about the show at Morrison's PR firm this morning? He asked without preamble. What kind of show? Word is your wife stormed into her boss's office demanding to work from home indefinitely. Something about a family emergency. Got shot down pretty hard. Samir's information network was impressive. The anchor attracted employees from half the downtown businesses, and he had a talent for collecting gossip that might prove useful later. How'd you hear about this? Bartender at Russo's called me. Apparently Morrison and your wife showed up for lunch looking like they'd been through a blender. Lots of dramatic whispering about legal options and emotional damages. I almost smiled. Keena was discovering that real life didn't operate according to the same rules as her carefully managed PR campaigns. You couldn't spin your way out of legal documents and property rights. They mention any specific legal options? Nothing concrete. But Morrison kept talking about how you'd manipulated the situation and how there had to be some kind of recourse. Samir paused. You want my advice? Document everything. These two are planning something. He was right. Keena and Talia were strategic thinkers who didn't accept defeat gracefully. They'd spend the next few days looking for leverage, some way to regain control of the narrative. I spent the afternoon organizing my records, creating a timeline of events that would stand up to scrutiny. The hotel receipt, the lease agreement, the utility transfers, the bank statements, everything that proved I'd acted within my legal rights while Keena had been charging romantic getaways to my credit card. Tuesday morning brought a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find a process server with an envelope containing a temporary restraining order. Keena was claiming I'd threatened her during our phone conversation Sunday night and requesting exclusive access to the apartment while the court sorted out our marital property dispute. The hearing was scheduled for Friday afternoon. I had 3 days to prepare a defense. I called a lawyer that afternoon, a woman named Rebecca Chen, who specialized in family law. Her office was in one of those converted brownstones near the courthouse, all hardwood floors and law books that probably hadn't been opened in decades. "This is fairly standard," she said after reviewing the paperwork. "Desperate spouse tries to use the courts to gain leverage in what's essentially a landlord-tenant dispute. Will it work? Not if we present the facts clearly." She leaned back in her chair, studying me with the calculating expression lawyers develop after years of evaluating clients. "The question is whether you want to fight this or settle it quietly." What would settling look like? You give her 30 days in the apartment to find alternative housing, maybe help with moving expenses. She drops the restraining order and any claims to marital property. And if we fight, we win, but it gets messy. Court records become public. Her affair becomes part of the official record. Her reputation takes a hit, which might affect her career. I thought about Keena's carefully cultivated professional image, the way she'd spent years building relationships with clients who valued discretion and reliability. A public court battle would undermine everything she'd worked for. "Let's fight," I said. Wednesday evening, I was closing up the shop when a familiar figure appeared in my peripheral vision. Jasper Quaid stood beside a gleaming Tesla Model S, wearing the kind of casual clothes that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Rhett, I'm Jasper. I think we need to talk." He was exactly what I'd expected, tall, confident, with the kind of easy smile that came from never having to worry about money. His handshake was firm but not aggressive, the practiced gesture of someone accustomed to making good first impressions. "About what?" I asked, not bothering to return the smile. "About this situation with Keena. I think there's been a misunderstanding." No misunderstanding. She wanted to test drive her ex-boyfriend, and you were available. Congratulations on passing the audition. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "It wasn't like that. We're old friends who needed to resolve some unfinished business." "Is that what you're calling it?" "Look, I know this is awkward for everyone involved, but Keena's going through a difficult time right now, and I think you're making it harder than it needs to be." I wiped my hands on a shop rag, taking my time with the motion. "You drove here to give me relationship advice?" "I drove here to suggest we handle this like civilized adults. Keena doesn't want to hurt you, but she needs space to figure out what she really wants. She's got all the space she needs. What she doesn't have is access to my apartment or my credit card." His expression shifted slightly, a flicker of annoyance breaking through the diplomatic facade. "The credit card was a mistake. She'll pay you back for the hotel." "I'm sure she will, along with interest and a formal apology for unauthorized use." "This doesn't have to be adversarial, Rhett. We're all adults here." "You're right," I said, "which is why I'm treating this like an adult. Keena made an adult decision to end our marriage. I'm respecting that decision and acting accordingly. She doesn't want to end your marriage. She wants to work things out. Then she shouldn't have spent the weekend in a hotel room with her ex-boyfriend." Jasper's diplomatic mask slipped a little further. "You're being deliberately obtuse. Relationships are complicated. Sometimes people need to explore their options before they can make informed decisions. And sometimes people need to face the consequences of their choices." I locked the shop door and headed toward my truck. "Enjoy your second chance, Jasper. Try not to screw it up this time." I left him standing beside his Tesla, probably wondering how the conversation had gotten away from him so quickly. Men like Jasper were accustomed to negotiating from positions of strength, using charm and financial leverage to get what they wanted. But I wasn't selling anything he could afford to buy. Thursday morning brought another surprise, an email from the building's insurance company, informing me that they'd received a complaint about unauthorized guest access to my apartment. Apparently, Keena had tried to use her key Tuesday night and discovered that the locks had been changed. She'd then called the insurance company to complain that I was violating the lease by denying her access to marital property. The insurance investigator had reviewed the lease agreement and my documentation of unauthorized credit card use, then ruled in my favor. The email concluded with a formal notice that Keena Vossen was no longer authorized to access the building without written permission from the primary tenant. I forwarded the email to my lawyer with a brief note: additional documentation for Friday's hearing. That afternoon, I drove to Talia Morrison's apartment complex, a trendy development near the river where young professionals paid premium prices for granite countertops and fitness centers they never used. I wasn't planning to confront anyone. I just wanted to see where Keena was staying, get a sense of her current situation. The complex was exactly what I'd expected, all glass and steel, with a lobby that looked like a hotel and rent that probably started at $3,000 a month. Talia's BMW was parked in a visitor's space, along with Keena's Honda Civic. I was about to leave when I spotted them through the lobby's floor-to-ceiling windows. Keena and Talia sat at a small table near the mailboxes, laptops open, papers scattered around them like they were planning a military campaign. They were dressed for business, Keena in one of her power suits, Talia in the kind of designer outfit that screamed, "I make more money than you." Both women looked focused and determined, the way they probably looked when they were destroying a competitor's reputation or launching a hostile takeover. I watched them for a few minutes, noting the body language and facial expressions. This wasn't grief or confusion. This was strategy. They were planning something, and whatever it was, they expected to win. My phone buzzed with a text from Samir. "Heard Morrison's been asking questions about your business, specifically about your client list and revenue streams. Thought you should know." I typed back, "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest she's looking for leverage. Be careful, man." I drove back to the shop with a new understanding of the situation. This wasn't just about Keena wanting to reconcile or Jasper trying to smooth things over. They were treating this like a business problem that required a business solution. The question was, what kind of solution were they planning? I spent Thursday evening reviewing my business records, looking for anything that might be used against me. The shop was profitable but not wealthy. I made enough to cover expenses and save a little, but I wasn't sitting on hidden assets or questionable income streams. My client list was solid. Collectors who appreciated quality work and paid their bills on time. My insurance was current, my taxes were filed, my permits were valid. There was nothing there that could be weaponized in a court battle. But Talia Morrison hadn't built her career by accepting surface-level answers. If she was digging into my business, she was looking for something specific. The question was whether she'd find it. Friday morning, I dressed carefully for court. Clean jeans, button-down shirt, sport coat that made me look respectable without trying too hard. The goal was to project competence and stability, the kind of person judges trusted to tell the truth. The courthouse was a granite monument to bureaucracy, all marble floors and echoing hallways that made every footstep sound important. I met my lawyer in the lobby, and we reviewed our strategy one final time. "Remember," Rebecca said as we headed toward the courtroom, "stick to the facts. Don't get emotional. Don't take the bait if they try to provoke you. We have the law on our side, but only if we present ourselves as the reasonable party." The hearing room was smaller than I'd expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic courtroom settings you see in movies. Judge Martinez was a middle-aged woman with the tired expression of someone who'd spent years listening to people's domestic problems. Keena sat at the opposite table with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed man who probably charged $500 an hour. She looked professional and composed, every inch the successful executive who'd been wronged by her unreasonable husband. The hearing lasted exactly 23 minutes. Keena's lawyer argued that I'd manipulated the situation to gain unfair advantage, that I'd used legal technicalities to punish my wife for exercising her right to marital counseling. My lawyer presented the facts: the lease agreement, the unauthorized credit card use, the documented timeline of events. She pointed out that Keena had initiated the separation, that I'd simply formalized an arrangement she'd requested. Judge Martinez asked exactly 3 questions. Was the lease agreement legally binding? Had Keena been properly notified of her change in tenant status? Was there any evidence of threats or coercion? The answers were yes, yes, and no. Motion denied, Judge Martinez said, making a note in her file. Mr. Vosin has acted within his legal rights as primary tenant. Ms. Vosin has 30 days to remove her personal property from the premises. I walked out of the courthouse feeling like I'd won something important, though I wasn't entirely sure what. Keena had gambled that the courts would side with emotion over law, and she'd lost. But as I reached the parking garage, I realized the real battle was just beginning. My truck's windshield had been spider-webbed by what looked like a ball-peen hammer. The damage was precise and deliberate, enough to make the vehicle unsafe to drive, but not quite enough to trigger serious vandalism charges. A note was tucked under the wiper blade. This is just the beginning. You have no idea what you've started. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. Keena and her allies were done playing by legal rules. I called the police from the courthouse parking garage, though I suspected it would be a waste of time. The responding officer was a tired-looking man in his 40s who'd probably seen enough domestic disputes to fill a small library. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked, photographing the damage with a digital camera that had seen better days. "My soon-to-be ex-wife and her friends," I said. "We just finished a court hearing about our separation." "Can you prove it?" "Not directly, but the timing's pretty convenient." He nodded with the weary expression of someone who'd heard this story before. "I'll file a report, but without witnesses or evidence, there's not much we can do. You might want to consider installing security cameras wherever you park." The tow truck arrived 20 minutes later, driven by a guy named Eddie who'd hauled away more than a few vehicles from domestic situations. He gave the damage a professional assessment while loading my truck onto his flatbed. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing," he said. "Hit it just right to spider the whole windshield without breaking through. Takes practice to get that kind of result." "Practice?" "Yeah, like they'd done it before." He secured the truck with practiced efficiency. "You want my advice? This kind of thing usually escalates. Might want to watch your back for a while." I caught a cab back to the shop where Samir was waiting with a cup of coffee and a grim expression. "Heard about your truck," he said. "Word travels fast around here." "How fast?" "Fast enough that Morrison's already bragging about it at Russo's. Apparently she's got friends who know how to send messages." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Talia Morrison had connections throughout the city's business community, relationships built over years of networking and mutual favors. If she'd decided to make this personal, she had resources I couldn't match. "What kind of friends?" "The kind who don't ask questions when someone needs a favor. Construction workers, repo men, guys who know how to make problems disappear." Samir handed me the coffee, his expression serious. "She's not playing games anymore, Rhett. This is war." I spent the afternoon researching Talia Morrison's background, using the kind of online investigation techniques I'd learned during my Army days. Her professional biography was impressive: MBA from a prestigious university, 10 years climbing the corporate ladder, a client list that included some of the city's most influential businesses. But her personal life was more interesting. 2 previous relationships that had ended badly, both with men who'd subsequently experienced mysterious business problems, a reputation for holding grudges and settling scores, a pattern of behavior that suggested she didn't handle rejection gracefully. The picture that emerged was of someone who treated personal conflicts like business challenges, using her professional network to destroy people who crossed her. Keena had chosen her ally carefully. My phone rang at 6 o'clock. Jasper's name appeared on the screen. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "This situation is getting out of hand." "I agree. Your girlfriend's friend just vandalized my truck." "That wasn't supposed to happen. Talia got carried away." "So you knew about it?" A pause. "I knew she was angry. I didn't know she'd do something illegal." "What did you think she'd do? Send me a strongly worded email?" "Look, I'm calling because I want to make this right. Keena's devastated about how things went in court today. She just wants to work things out." "Then she should have thought about that before she asked me to pretend we were divorced. It wasn't supposed to be real. It was just supposed to be a weekend. And my truck wasn't supposed to be vandalized. But here we are." Another pause. When Jasper spoke again, his voice had lost its diplomatic tone. "You're being unreasonable, Rhett. Keena made a mistake, but she's trying to fix it. The least you could do is meet her halfway." "I did meet her halfway. I gave her exactly what she asked for." "You know that's not what she meant." "Then she should have been more careful with her words." I hung up before he could respond. Whatever sympathy I might have felt for Keena's situation had evaporated when someone took a hammer to my truck. She'd escalated this from a domestic dispute to something uglier, and now she'd have to live with the consequences. Saturday morning, I took a cab to the auto glass shop to check on my truck. The repair would take 3 days and cost $800, money I didn't particularly want to spend, but could afford if necessary. "You want to file an insurance claim?" the shop owner asked. "Not yet. Let's see if the person responsible wants to pay for it directly." He gave me a knowing look. "Domestic situation?" "Something like that." "Yeah, we see a lot of that. Usually gets worse before it gets better." I spent the rest of Saturday installing security cameras around my shop, small wireless units that would upload footage to a cloud server. If Talia Morrison's friends planned to escalate their campaign of harassment, I wanted documentation. Sunday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Keena appeared at the shop entrance, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. She'd traded her power suits for jeans and a sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Just the two of us, without lawyers or friends or anyone else?" I gestured for her to come inside, noting that she glanced around nervously before entering. The shop felt different with her in it, more tense, like the air before a thunderstorm. "I'm sorry about your truck," she said immediately. "That wasn't my idea, and I told Talia she went too far." "But you didn't stop her." "I didn't know she was planning it. She just said she was going to handle things." "And you thought that meant what exactly?" Keena looked around the shop, taking in the restored cars and vintage equipment. "I forgot how much you love this place, how much work you've put into building it." "Don't change the subject." I'm trying to explain something." She moved closer, her voice dropping to the intimate tone she'd used during our early dating years. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I should have been more careful with my words. And you're right. I asked for something without really thinking about what it meant. I hurt you, and I'm sorry." I studied her face, looking for signs of the calculated manipulation I'd grown accustomed to over the past year, but she seemed genuinely remorseful, more like the woman I'd married than the corporate strategist she'd become. "What do you want, Keena?" "I want to try again. Not the way we were before, but something better. Something more honest." "What about Jasper?" "Jasper was a mistake, a way of avoiding the real problems in our marriage instead of dealing with them." "And what are the real problems?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on my workbench. "We stopped talking to each other, really talking. We became roommates who shared expenses instead of partners who shared a life." She wasn't wrong. Our marriage had become a series of practical arrangements, a business partnership that generated tax benefits and split household costs. We'd stopped dreaming together, stopped planning for anything beyond the next month's bills. So, what would you do differently? I asked. I'd start by being honest about what I want and what I'm afraid of. Which is what? I'm afraid that I've become someone I don't like very much. Someone who treats relationships like business deals and people like assets to be managed. She looked at me directly for the first time since entering the shop. I'm afraid that I've lost the person you fell in love with. It was the most honest thing she'd said to me in months, maybe years. And it was probably true. The woman I'd married had been ambitious, but not calculating, driven, but not ruthless. She'd changed gradually, so slowly that I'd barely noticed until it was too late. What about the apartment? I asked. Keep it. I'll find somewhere else to live, at least for a while. We need space to figure things out properly. And your friends? Talia and her network of problem solvers? I'll handle Talia. She means well, but she doesn't understand that some problems can't be fixed with pressure and intimidation. I wanted to believe her. Despite everything that had happened, despite the hotel receipts and court hearings and vandalized truck, part of me still remembered why I'd married her in the first place. This would have to be completely different, I said. No games, no manipulation, no testing. If we try again, it's because we both want to be here, not because we're afraid of being alone. I understand. And no more Jasper. Whatever you two had, it's finished. It was already finished. It was never really started. We talked for another hour, working through the practical details of a potential reconciliation. She'd stay with Talia for another month while we figured things out. We'd start with dinner dates, like we were meeting for the first time. We'd go to counseling if necessary. It all sounded reasonable and mature, and exactly like the kind of second chance that successful couples gave each other. But as I watched her leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing from her performance. Maybe it was the way she'd glanced at her phone twice during our conversation, as if she was expecting an important message. Maybe it was the practiced quality of her apology, like she'd rehearsed it beforehand. Or maybe it was the fact that she'd never actually answered my question about what she was afraid of. Monday morning brought the answer. I arrived at the shop to find a notice taped to the door. Building inspection scheduled. Monday 9 a.m. Compliance required. The inspector was already waiting, a thin man with a clipboard and the officious manner of someone who enjoyed finding violations. He spent 2 hours examining every inch of my shop, measuring clearances and checking permits with the thoroughness of an accountant auditing a tax return. You're going to need to bring a few things up to code, he said finally. Fire suppression system needs updating, electrical panel needs inspection, and you'll need additional ventilation for the paint booth. What's the timeline? 30 days to submit plans, 60 days to complete the work. He handed me a violation notice with an estimated cost of compliance, $15,000. This is interesting timing, I said. I've been operating here for 3 years without any problems. Anonymous complaint came in Friday. Someone reported potential safety violations. Friday. The same day as our court hearing, the same day my truck had been vandalized. Any idea who filed the complaint? Anonymous means anonymous, but whoever it was knows enough about commercial building codes to file a very detailed report. After he left, I called the city planning office to request a copy of the complaint. It was 4 pages long, written in the precise language of someone with extensive knowledge of municipal regulations. The kind of knowledge that came from years of dealing with commercial real estate and zoning issues. The kind of knowledge that someone like Talia Morrison would have accumulated during her career in corporate consulting. I called Samir and explained the situation. How much do you have in savings? He asked. Maybe $8,000, not nearly enough to cover the upgrades. What about a loan? Possible, but it would put me in debt for years. and there's no guarantee they won't find more violations once I start the work. You think this is Morrison's play? Force you into bankruptcy so you can't fight the divorce? It's exactly her play. She's using the system against me, the same way she probably destroys business competitors. So what's your move? I thought about Keena's visit the day before, her carefully rehearsed apology and promise of reconciliation. The timing was suspicious. She'd approached me just as her friend was preparing to file the complaint that would destroy my business. I said slowly, it's time to stop playing defense. That evening, I drove to Talia Morrison's apartment complex and parked across the street. I wasn't planning to confront anyone. I just wanted to observe, to understand the enemy's routine and habits. Talia arrived home at 7:30, driving her BMW with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd never doubted her right to take whatever she wanted. She parked in her assigned space and headed for the lobby, phone pressed to her ear in what looked like an intense conversation. 20 minutes later, Keena's Honda pulled into the visitors section. But instead of getting out immediately, she sat in her car for several minutes, also talking on her phone. Both women entered the building within minutes of each other, but they'd clearly coordinated their arrival. Whatever they were planning, they were still working together. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope you're enjoying your building inspection. This is just the beginning. Drop the divorce proceedings and we'll make the problems go away. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to my lawyer with a note. Evidence of extortion. Please advise. Her response came within minutes. This is criminal behavior. Forward to police immediately. Also suggests they're more desperate than they're letting on. She was right. People who resorted to extortion and vandalism were people who'd run out of legal options. Kena and Talia had played their strongest cards, the court system and official complaints, and neither had worked. Now they were improvising, which meant they were vulnerable. I spent the rest of the evening researching Talia Morrison's business relationships, looking for pressure points and potential allies. Her PR firm represented several controversial clients, companies that relied on her discretion and reputation management skills. If her own reputation became a liability, those clients might start looking for new representation. The question was, what kind of reputation problems might someone like Talia Morrison want to keep hidden? Tuesday morning, I met with a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former police detective who specialized in corporate investigations. His office was in a converted warehouse near the docks, all exposed brick and industrial lighting that made it feel like a movie set. You want me to investigate your wife's best friend? He said, reviewing the notes I'd provided. That's not unusual. What's unusual is the level of sophistication in their harassment campaign. Meaning? Meaning they're using tactics that require inside knowledge and professional connections. The building inspection, the vandalism, the extortion. That's not amateur hour. Someone's coordinating this. He pulled out a tablet and showed me a timeline he'd constructed based on my information. Look at the sequence. Court hearing Friday morning, truck vandalized Friday afternoon, building inspection scheduled Friday evening, reconciliation attempt Sunday, extortion text Monday night. They're working from a playbook. Exactly. Someone's done this before. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with the calculating expression of a man who'd spent years reading people's motivations. Question is, do you want to know what they're planning next, or do you want to stop them from planning anything at all? What's the difference? Investigation takes time and costs money. Direct action gets faster results but carries more risk. What kind of direct action? The kind that turns their playbook against them. You said Morrison represents controversial clients? Several. A payday loan company, a pharmaceutical firm with regulatory problems, a real estate developer who's been accused of environmental violations. Those are exactly the kind of clients who don't like negative publicity. If Morrison's own behavior became a liability, they might reconsider their relationship with her firm. I understood what he was suggesting. Instead of playing defense against their harassment campaign, I could go on offense against their professional reputations. What would that look like? Morrison's made enemies during her career, people she's destroyed, competitors she's undermined, former employees she's mistreated. We find those people and give them a platform to tell their stories. Is that legal? Completely. We're not fabricating anything or breaking any laws. We're just helping the truth find its way to the right audiences. I thought about the building inspection notice, the $15,000 I didn't have, the systematic campaign to destroy everything I'd built. Keena and Talia had declared war, and they'd assumed I'd be too honorable or too stupid to fight back effectively. They'd miscalculated. How long would it take? 2 weeks to gather the information, another week to start distributing it strategically. He quoted me a price that would exhaust my remaining savings, but seemed worth it if it ended their harassment campaign. Do it, I said. That afternoon, I received a call from my insurance company. Someone had filed a complaint claiming that my shop represented a public safety hazard due to improper storage of flammable materials. An investigator would be arriving Thursday to conduct a full safety audit. The pattern was becoming clear. They planned to bury me under an avalanche of official complaints and regulatory violations, each one requiring time and money to resolve. Even if I eventually proved my innocence, the process would bankrupt me and destroy my business. But two could play that game. I spent Wednesday researching Talia Morrison's PR firm, looking for anything that might interest regulatory agencies or professional licensing boards. Her client list included several companies with questionable business practices, and her marketing materials made some bold claims about her ability to manage difficult situations and neutralize negative publicity. The pharmaceutical client was particularly interesting. Morrison's firm had helped them respond to allegations that they'd hidden adverse effects data from clinical trials. The response campaign had included attacking the credibility of whistleblowing scientists and funding studies that contradicted the negative findings. If the state medical board learned that a PR firm was actively working to suppress legitimate safety concerns, they might take a dim view of that firm's business practices. I filed a formal complaint with the medical board Wednesday evening, providing detailed documentation of Morrison's role in the pharmaceutical company's response strategy. The complaint was factual and well documented, exactly the kind of regulatory nightmare that could tie up a business for months. Thursday's insurance inspection went better than expected. The investigator was a professional who actually knew something about auto repair shops, and he quickly determined that my facility met all safety requirements. The complaint was dismissed as frivolous and apparently motivated by personal animus. But the victory felt hollow. I was winning individual battles while losing the larger war of attrition. Every day brought new harassment, new complaints, new problems that required time and energy to resolve. My phone rang Thursday evening. Keena's name appeared on the screen. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with stress. "This situation is getting out of control." "I agree. Your friend's campaign of harassment is becoming criminal." "That's not what I mean. Someone's been spreading rumors about Talia's business practices. Her clients are asking questions." "Maybe they should ask questions. Maybe they should know exactly who they're paying for representation." "Rhett, this has to stop. We're all adults here. We can work this out without destroying each other." "I tried to work it out. You responded by having my truck vandalized and my business inspected. I told you. That wasn't my idea. But you didn't stop it. Just like you're not stopping whatever Talia's planning next." A long pause. "What do you want?" "I want you to call off your attack dogs. I want a written apology for the harassment, and I want reimbursement for my truck repairs and legal fees. And if I do that, then maybe we can have the honest conversation you claim to want. I'll talk to Talia. You do that. And Keena, the next time someone files a frivolous complaint against my business, I'm going to assume it came from you, and I'm going to respond accordingly." I hung up before she could reply. The conversation had been a fishing expedition, an attempt to gauge my resolve and discover what I knew about their operations. But it had also revealed something important. They were feeling pressure from my counterattack. Friday morning brought confirmation that my strategy was working. Marcus Webb called with an update on his investigation. "Morrison's got problems," he said. "3 former employees willing to go on record about unethical business practices. 2 competitors who can document instances where she stole clients through industrial espionage. And 1 very interesting story about a harassment cover-up that could destroy her reputation permanently." How reliable are these sources? Rock solid. I've got documentation, emails, recorded phone calls. This woman's made a career out of destroying people, and she's left a trail of evidence behind her. What's the next step? I start making phone calls. Journalists who cover the PR industry, professional licensing boards, former clients who might be interested to learn about her methods. He paused. "You sure you want to go this far? Once this information gets out, there's no taking it back." I thought about the building inspection, the insurance investigation, the systematic campaign to destroy my livelihood. Talia Morrison had declared total war, and she'd assumed I wouldn't have the resources or knowledge to fight back effectively. She'd been wrong on both counts. "Release everything," I said. The first story appeared online Friday afternoon. Local PR executive under investigation for unethical business practices. It was a carefully researched piece that detailed Morrison's history of using illegal tactics to gather intelligence on competitors and manipulate media coverage for controversial clients. The second story went live Friday evening. Whistleblowers allege pattern of harassment at Morrison Communications. This one included interviews with 3 former employees who described a toxic work environment where Morrison routinely violated labor laws and professional ethics standards. By Saturday morning, Morrison's largest client, the pharmaceutical company, had issued a statement distancing themselves from her firm pending a full investigation of the allegations. My phone rang at noon. Talia Morrison's name appeared on the screen. "You have no idea what you've done," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Those stories are lies. Malicious fabrications designed to destroy my reputation. They're documented facts reported by legitimate journalists. You paid those people to lie about me. I paid an investigator to find the truth. What he found wasn't very flattering, but it was all verifiable. This isn't over. You think you can destroy me and walk away? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A woman who uses intimidation and harassment to get what she wants, and who's finally met someone willing to fight back. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner." She hung up, but the damage was done. Morrison's carefully constructed professional reputation was collapsing, and her business was hemorrhaging clients. Within a week, she'd go from predator to prey. Saturday evening, I was working late at the shop when I heard footsteps outside. I looked up to see Jasper Quaid standing in the doorway, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked like desperation. "We need to end this," he said without preamble. "This has gone way too far." "I agree. Your girlfriend's friend tried to destroy my business, and I responded in kind. Now we're even." "Talia's not my girlfriend. She's Keena's friend, and she's out of control." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you got involved with married women." He stepped into the shop, his movements tense and aggressive. "You think this is some kind of game? You think you can just destroy people's lives because your feelings got hurt? I think people who declare war should be prepared to fight one." "Nobody declared war. Keena made a mistake, and you turned it into a vendetta. Keena asked me to pretend we were divorced so she could sleep with her ex-boyfriend. I stopped pretending. Everything else has been your side's attempt to force me back into line. You're being deliberately obtuse. Relationships are complicated. People make mistakes. And people face consequences for their mistakes. That's how the adult world works." Jasper moved closer, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to hit me, which would have been a serious tactical error. I'd spent 4 years in the army learning how to handle aggressive men, and Jasper had spent his career in boardrooms where physical confrontation never happened. "You want to know the truth?" he said, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Keena never loved you. She married you because she thought you were safe, someone who wouldn't challenge her or interfere with her career. You were supposed to be a placeholder until someone better came along. And you're someone better? I'm someone who understands her ambitions, someone who can give her the life she deserves. Then you should be thanking me for getting out of your way. We would have been, if you'd handled this like a gentleman. Instead, you turned it into a war zone." I set down the wrench I'd been holding and gave him my full attention. "Let me explain something to you, Jasper. I didn't start this war. Your girlfriend asked me to fake a divorce, and I made it real. Your girlfriend's friend tried to destroy my business, and I destroyed hers instead. At every step, I've simply responded to actions taken against me. You could have walked away. I did walk away. You people are the ones who kept coming after me. Because you were being unreasonable. Because you expected me to roll over and let you take whatever you wanted without consequences." I moved closer to him, noting how he instinctively stepped backward. "Here's what's going to happen next. You and Keena are going to disappear from my life permanently. No more phone calls, no more visits, no more attempts at reconciliation. You wanted her, you've got her. Enjoy. And if we don't, then I'll assume you want to continue this war, and I'll respond accordingly. And trust me, Jasper, you really don't want to find out what that looks like." He stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to decide if I was bluffing. But something in my expression must have convinced him I wasn't, because he backed toward the door. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." After he left, I finished my work and locked up the shop. The confrontation had been inevitable, and it had gone exactly as I'd expected. Jasper was a businessman who was accustomed to negotiating from positions of strength, but he'd never faced someone who was willing to accept scorched earth as an acceptable outcome. The war was essentially over. Talia Morrison's business was collapsing, Keena's reputation was damaged by association, and Jasper was discovering that real-world consequences were different from boardroom setbacks. But I suspected they had one more move left, one final attempt to regain control of the situation, and I was already planning my response. Sunday morning brought the final piece of evidence I needed. Marcus Webb called with information that changed everything. "Remember that harassment cover-up I mentioned? The one involving Morrison's firm?" he said. "I've got the details now, and it's worse than I thought." "How much worse?" The victim was a 22-year-old intern. The perpetrator was Morrison's business partner, a man named David Kellner. When the intern filed a complaint, Morrison didn't just cover it up. She actively destroyed the victim's credibility and forced her out of the industry. "How long ago?" 2 years. The intern's name was Sarah Chen. She's working as a barista now because Morrison made sure she'd never get another job in PR or marketing. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't just about unethical business practices anymore. This was about a young woman whose career had been destroyed to protect a predator. "Is Chen willing to go public?" She's been waiting for someone to give her a platform. Morrison's reputation protected her for 2 years, but now that reputation is cracking. Set up a meeting. I want to hear her story directly. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown, a neutral location where Sarah Chen could feel safe telling her story. She was a small woman in her mid-20s with the kind of nervous energy that came from years of looking over her shoulder. "I thought about speaking out before," she said, stirring her coffee with shaking hands. But Morrison's firm represented half the major employers in the city. She made it clear that if I caused trouble, I'd never work in my field again. What exactly happened? Kellner started making comments about my appearance during my second week. Then he began finding excuses to touch me. Hand on my shoulder, brush against me in the hallway, that sort of thing. When I complained to Morrison, she said I was being oversensitive and that I needed to learn how to handle workplace dynamics. Did it escalate? He cornered me in the supply room one afternoon and tried to kiss me. When I pushed him away, he said I was lucky to have the internship and that he could make my life very difficult if I didn't show proper appreciation. You filed a formal complaint? I tried to. Morrison scheduled a meeting, but instead of investigating my allegations, she spent 2 hours explaining why filing a complaint would ruin my career. She said Kellner was a respected professional with powerful connections, and that no one would believe a young intern over an established executive. But you filed it anyway? I was young and naive. I thought the system would protect me. She laughed bitterly. Morrison made sure the complaint disappeared, then started spreading rumors that I was unstable and had made false accusations against multiple supervisors. How did that affect your job search? Every interview went the same way. They'd seem interested until they called for references, then suddenly the position would be filled or the requirements would change. It took me 6 months to realize Morrison was actively sabotaging my applications. I thought about Talia Morrison's systematic campaign against my business, the way she'd used official channels and professional connections to create problems. She'd done the same thing to Sarah Chen, but on a much more personal level. What would you need to go public with this story? Protection, legal representation, some guarantee that speaking out won't make things worse. She looked at me directly for the first time. Why are you willing to help me? Because Morrison tried to destroy my business when I wouldn't let her friend manipulate me. Because people like her only stop when someone makes them face consequences. And because you want revenge. That too. She smiled for the first time during our conversation. Good. I've been waiting 2 years for someone to give me a chance at revenge. Monday morning, I called a press conference. It was a small affair, a few local journalists, a representative from the State Ethics Board, and Sarah Chen with her lawyer. But it was enough. Chen told her story with quiet dignity, providing documentation that proved Morrison had actively covered up harassment and retaliated against the victim. The Ethics Board representative announced a formal investigation into Morrison's business practices. The journalists asked pointed questions about the culture of intimidation at Morrison's firm. By Monday evening, the story had been picked up by regional media outlets. By Tuesday morning, it was trending on social media. By Wednesday, Morrison Communications had lost its remaining clients and announced it was ceasing operations.